There is a particular kind of quiet that comes over people when they first understand the Amazon. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of realizing how little of it is on your side. I have spent a great deal of my life in forests like this one, and I still feel it. You step in expecting green, and beauty, and birdsong. All of that is there, but so is something else, running underneath it, patient and old, and entirely indifferent to you. The Amazon is not cruel. Cruelty needs intention, and the forest has none. It is simply full, more full of life than anywhere else on Earth, and a great deal of that life has spent millions of years learning to feed, to defend itself, and to survive by means that we find difficult to look at directly. What follows are 7 of those means, 7 real discoveries from this forest, each one true, each one checked, and each one unsettling in its own particular way. I am not going to exaggerate them. I will not need to. The plain facts are strange enough on their own, and where a story has grown taller than the truth, I will tell you that too. One idea is worth carrying with you as we go. This single forest is thought to hold more kinds of living thing than anywhere else on the planet. Millions of species, many still unnamed, pressed together in a competition for light, and food, and safety, that never once pauses. A place that crowded with life does not produce gentle neighbors. It produces specialists, hunters, and poisoners, and parasites, each one shaped by time, to do a single difficult thing, extraordinarily well. What we are about to look at is not a cabinet of freaks. It is simply what abundance looks like, seen up close. Let me begin with something small, something that begins with an itch. The first lives, for part of its life, inside other animals, including on occasion us. Picture a small fly, moving through the forest. It does not bite you itself. It does something cleverer and stranger. Instead, it captures a mosquito or another biting insect and glues its own eggs onto that insect's body and lets it go. When that mosquito later lands on warm skin, the heat wakes the eggs. A tiny larva drops onto the skin, finds a pore or the small wound of the bite, and works its way in. And there it stays, under the skin, growing for weeks. We call it the human botfly. The person rarely feels the moment it enters. What they feel, days later, is a swelling that will not heal, and now and then a movement inside it, and a sharp, deep pain as the larva feeds and breathes through a tiny hole it keeps open to the air. Here is the part that changes how you think about it. The larva is not trying to harm you. It has no interest in you at all, beyond warmth and food. To the fly, a passing mammal is simply a safe place to raise its young, and your body is doing exactly what the fly evolved for it to do. That is the first thing the Amazon teaches. Much of what frightens us here is not an attack. It is another creature, quietly using us, in a system that was working long before we arrived to be disturbed by it. What remains genuinely unpleasant and genuinely true is how ordinary this is. For the people and animals of these forests, the botfly is not a horror story. It is a nuisance to be managed, an old and familiar tenant. Only to a visitor is it a nightmare. There is a grim cleverness to how it stays. Once under the skin, the larva anchors itself with rows of tiny backward-facing spines, so that pulling at it only makes it grip harder. And it keeps a small hole open to the surface, through which it breathes, a single dark point on the swelling that is often the only outward sign of what lies within. The people of these regions have long known the answer to it. Their trick is not to pull, but to close that breathing hole with thick tree sap, or tape, or a smear of fat, until the larva is forced to come up for air of its own accord and can be drawn out whole. It is old knowledge, calmly applied, to a problem a newcomer meets with pure panic. The horror, once again, is mostly in the eye of the person who did not grow up here. My second discovery has a reputation far larger than the animal itself. And untangling the two is its own kind of lesson. In the rivers here lives a small, thin, translucent catfish, only a few centimeters long. Its name, in the local telling, is the candiru. For more than a century, one story about it has traveled the world. That this little fish can swim up the stream of a person relieving themselves in the river, enter the body, and lodge there with backward-pointing spines, causing terrible harm. It is, without doubt, one of the most feared fish on Earth. Travelers have refused to enter the water because of it. Whole expeditions have carried the dread of it. Now, here I have to slow down and be honest, because this is exactly the kind of story that grows in the retelling. The candiru is a real fish, and it is a parasite. That part is true. It feeds by slipping into the gills of larger fish and drinking their blood. Drawn by the flow of water passing over those gills, it is very good at what it does. The famous claim about people is a different matter. There is only one well-known reported case from the city of Manaus near the end of the 1990s. And when other scientists examined that report closely, they found the evidence thin and the story difficult to support. The plain truth is that a person is not a fish, and the candiru's whole way of hunting is built around gills, which we do not have. So the honest position is this: the fish is real, and its way of feeding on other fish is genuinely unsettling. The legend that has terrified generations of visitors, however, rests on almost nothing. This is one the Amazon did not need us to invent. We managed that ourselves. It is worth asking how a story like this traveled so far. Part of the answer is that it was carried home, in all seriousness, by early naturalists who wrote it into their accounts of the region and lent it the weight of the printed page. Later, a tidy theory attached itself to it, that the fish could smell its way toward a person through traces in the water, in the same manner it finds the breath of a fish at its gills. That theory was eventually tested in the laboratory, and it did not hold up well. The candiru does not appear to hunt by chasing chemicals through open water in the way the legend would need it to. What we are left with is a real and remarkable little parasite, wearing a reputation stitched onto it by a century of frightened retelling. The third is not a story at all. It is a measurement, and it is used on purpose by people. There is an ant here, large and dark, that most would walk past without a second look. It is called the bullet ant, and it carries what is widely held to be the most painful sting of any insect in the world. The pain has been ranked, carefully, by researchers who study these things. On their scale, most stings we know, a bee, a wasp, sit near the bottom. The bullet ant sits alone at the very top. Those who have felt it describe waves of burning that last for hours, and the name itself comes from the comparison people reach for. That being stung feels like being shot. Now consider what some people do with that. Among the Sateré-Mawe people of the Brazilian Amazon, there is a rite of passage for young men. Dozens of these ants are woven, stingers inward, into a glove made of leaves. The young man puts his hand inside and holds it there, while the ants sting again and again. He is expected to endure it in silence. And he does this not once but many times over the years, as a mark of strength and of belonging. I find this one difficult to file under horror, and that is precisely why it belongs here. The same sting that we would rank as the worst in the insect world is, to another people, a test to be met with dignity. This forest is full of pain. What we do with it is a matter of culture, not only of nerves. There is a reason the pain lasts as long as it does. The sting delivers a particular molecule, a small paralyzing compound that acts directly on the nerves, jamming their signals so that the body goes on reporting agony long after the sting itself is over. Those waves can carry on for the better part of a day. For the young man inside the glove of ants, that is not an unfortunate side effect. It is the entire point. His arm may shake and swell and hang useless for hours afterward, and he will be expected to return to the glove again in the months and years that follow. What looks to us like the very worst the insect world can offer is, to him, a ladder that he chooses to climb. The fourth is a matter of chemistry, and of a strange gift hidden inside a genuine danger. Along the forest floor, and sometimes in the houses at its edge, lives a large, fast, aggressive spider. It does not build a web to wait in. It wanders, at night, hunting, and it is quick to raise its front legs and stand its ground. People often call it the Brazilian wandering spider, and by one measure it holds the record as the most venomous spider in the world. Its bite delivers a toxin that acts on the nervous system, and in serious cases, without treatment, it can be genuinely dangerous, particularly to the very young or the frail. That is the danger, and it is real, though deaths are in fact rare, because antivenom exists and the spider does not always inject a full dose. But here the story takes a turn that few expect. One of the effects of that venom, in men, is a strange and painful one, a lasting physical response that doctors noted again and again. And rather than simply treat it as a symptom, researchers began to ask a question. What exactly in the venom is causing this? And could that same molecule, understood and controlled, be turned to use in medicine? That work is ongoing, and I will not overstate it. But it points at something that runs right through this forest. The line between poison and medicine is thin, and often the two are the very same substance, seen from different sides. A thing that can harm you in the dark may, once understood, become a thing that helps you. There is a second reason you may have heard of this spider, and it has nothing to do with the forest. Now and then one is carried out of the Amazon by accident, folded into a shipment of bananas, and turns up in a shop or a kitchen on the far side of the world. The alarm that follows is usually far larger than the real danger, but the animal at the center of it is genuine enough, and the medicine hidden inside its venom is being taken seriously. Researchers have picked out particular molecules within it and begun testing them, carefully, for exactly the kind of controlled effect that the raw venom produces so painfully in the wild. It is slow and unfinished work, but it is real, and it began with one of the creatures people fear most, which is exactly where the fifth discovery leads. On the forest floor, in the leaf litter, sit some of the most beautiful animals in the Amazon. Small frogs, no larger than a thumbnail, colored in brilliant reds and golds and blues. Their colors are not for show, they are a warning. The skin of these frogs carries some of the most powerful natural poisons known, and the brightest of them are among the most toxic animals alive. A tiny amount, from the most extreme species, is enough to kill. The local peoples understood this long before any laboratory did. They used the toxin, carefully, on the tips of their hunting darts, which is how these animals came to be called poison dart frogs. The way they did it was precise and unhurried. A dart tip was drawn gently across the frog's back, picking up only a trace of the toxin, and that trace was enough to bring down animals high in the canopy that no ordinary arrow could reach. Often the frog itself was not even killed. It was a tool to be used and respected, and then set down again unharmed. For a long time, that was the whole story. A beautiful frog, a deadly skin, a hunting tool. Then science asked the harder question. How does the poison work, and what is it exactly, at the level of the molecule? From one of these frogs came the answer that changed things. A compound in its skin was found to block pain in a way quite unlike morphine, and by some measures far more powerfully. It was far too dangerous to use as it was, but once its structure was known, chemists could begin to build safer versions, designed to keep the pain relief and lose the lethal edge. The frog itself does not make the poison from nothing, as it happens. It seems to take it from the small creatures it eats and concentrate it, which means the true source is woven deeper still into the web of the forest. We know this because of a simple, telling fact. Raise these frogs in captivity and feed them ordinary food, and within a generation they lose their poison almost entirely. The danger was never truly the frog's own. It was borrowed, molecule by molecule, from the tiny forest creatures it eats, and stored away in the skin. The most extreme of them, a small golden frog from the forests of the northwest, carries a toxin that jams the nerves so completely that there is almost no surviving a full dose. A single animal is said to hold enough to kill several grown adults. And yet it sits in the open leaf litter, brightly colored and unhurried, because in the whole of the forest almost nothing dares to touch it. Its color is not a disguise, it is a promise. That is the pattern, again. The most frightening thing on the forest floor turned out to hold, inside its danger, something we have spent decades trying to learn from. My sixth discovery is about size, and about how recently the forest was still hiding one of its giants from us. The green anaconda is already the heaviest snake in the world. Not the longest, but by far the most massive. A slow, thick, water-loving predator that can take prey as large as a deer, and that has featured in travelers' tales for as long as Europeans have entered the Amazon. It hunts by patience and by sheer weight. Lying almost wholly submerged, with only its eyes above the surface, it waits for an animal to come down to the water and takes it in a single lunge, folding coil after coil around the body and simply holding on. It does not shatter bones. It waits and tightens and outlasts. A large one can deal with prey the size of a capybara or a caiman, and then have no need to feed again for weeks. You would think of an animal that large, that famous, that studied, we would know all there was to know. We did not. Only in the year 2024, working with researchers in the field, scientists announced that what we had been calling the green anaconda was, in fact, more than one species. The great anacondas of the north, it turned out, were genetically distinct from those of the south, different enough to be named as a species of their own, new to science. Think about what that means. Not a beetle, not a small frog in a hidden valley, one of the largest predators on the continent, hiding a second identity from us until the present decade. What is still being worked out is how the two kinds differ in their lives, and how far each one ranges. But the central fact stands. And it is humbling. A giant that everyone believed they knew was, in truth, only half understood, right up until now. The difference between the two turned out to run surprisingly deep. In their genes, the northern and the southern giants differ by a margin far greater than their near-identical appearance would ever suggest, wide enough, by some comparisons, to rival the distance between quite separate kinds of mammal. To the eye, they are almost the same snake. In their inheritance, they parted ways a very long time ago. And this is not only a matter of what we call them. If there are two species where we had always counted one, then each is rarer than we believed, and each must be protected in its own right. A giant we assumed was safe in its sheer abundance may, once split in two, turn out to be far more vulnerable than we knew. If the forest could keep that from us, it is fair to end by asking what else it might be keeping. And that brings me to the last of the 7, which is the one I must handle with the most care. Deep in the Amazon, there is a story, old and widespread among many peoples of the forest. A story of a huge creature, taller than a person when it rears up, covered in coarse hair, immensely strong, and to be avoided at all costs. In one telling it carries the name Minguari. For a long time, outsiders filed this away as pure legend, one more monster from the deep woods. But some researchers noticed something in the details: the size, the claws, the description of a hide so tough that arrows would not pierce it. And they asked a careful question, not, is there a monster, but could this story be a memory? Because the Amazon was once home to real giants, great ground sloths, animals the size of a small elephant, that walked this land until a few thousand years ago, and then died out. In the long span of human presence here, people and those giants may well have overlapped. So one idea, and I want to be clear that it is only an idea, is that the Minguari is not a living animal still hiding in the forest, but a memory of one that is truly gone. A description of a real creature, passed down through countless generations, long after the animal itself vanished. Let me be plain about the evidence, because the temptation here is to leave the mystery hanging, and that would be dishonest. There is no scientific proof of a large unknown beast living in the Amazon today. Searchers have found none. The honest, careful position is that the animal is not out there. But the story may still be true in a deeper way. Not as a living monster, but as one of the oldest memories our species holds, of a time when we shared this forest with things far larger than ourselves. The details fit more closely than you might expect. Those great ground sloths did not have soft, ordinary hides. Their skin was studded with small bones, a kind of armor set into the flesh itself, which would indeed have turned aside a spear or an arrow. A hunter who faced one, and lived to tell of it, might well have described a beast that no weapon could pierce. And the timing allows for it. These animals survived in South America until something like 10,000 years ago, by which point people had long been present in the land. For a stretch of that time, our ancestors and those giants walked the very same ground. If any memory could endure 10,000 years, carried mouth to mouth down the generations, then a creature that large and that dangerous is exactly the kind we would expect to keep. We should be careful with the idea, and I hold it lightly. It is difficult to prove that any story is a memory this old, and easy to talk ourselves into seeing what we hope to see. But it is not a foolish thought. In more than one part of the world, the myths of a people seem to carry a faint echo of the great animals that once shared their land and then vanished. If that is what the Minguari is, then it is not a monster hiding in the trees. It is something rarer, and in its way more moving. A memorial, spoken aloud, to a giant we drove into the dark long ago. That, in the end, is what these 7 have in common. A fly that raises its young beneath our skin. A little fish wrapped in a legend far bigger than itself. A sting turned into a test of manhood. A venom that may yet become a medicine. A poison that already has. A giant that hid its true name until last year. And a monster that may be the ghost of a real one. None of it is cruel. All of it is simply the Amazon, being what it has always been, fuller of life and of strangeness than we are ready for. It is worth noticing who stays calm through all of this. The people who have always lived here do not walk the forest in terror of the botfly, or the ant, or the snake. They know these things, they respect them, and they get on with their lives among them, as their families have for countless generations. Fear of the Amazon is, very largely, the reaction of the outsider, arriving with a head full of stories and meeting the real thing for the first time. I have learned over the years not to bring my fear into a forest like this. Fear makes you see monsters and miss the truth, which is almost always stranger and more interesting than the monster would have been. The forest does not hate us. It does not think of us at all. It is simply busy, endlessly busy, with the work of living. And if it unsettles us, that is not a warning and not a threat. It is an invitation to look more closely and to understand at last what was there the whole time.